The observation station behind the moon had been watching Earth for 300 years. The aliens who worked there had seen everything. They watched humans discover electricity. They watched humans build their first airplanes. They watched humans split the atom and create weapons that could destroy cities. They watched humans take their first steps on their own moon, planting flags and leaving footprints in the gray dust. Ambassador Al of the Dominion had been stationed at the observation post for 40 years. His species was reptilian, with scales that shifted color based on mood and 4 eyes that could see in multiple spectrums. He had grown bored with watching Earth. The humans were predictable. They fought wars with each other. They polluted their planet. They broadcast endless entertainment signals into space, letting anyone with a receiver listen to their music and watch their stories. The Galactic Assembly, the governing body that ruled over 200 species across the galaxy, had classified Earth as a primitive world. The humans were interesting, yes. They were creative and adaptable, but they were also violent and tribal. The Assembly's scientists predicted that humanity would either destroy itself with nuclear weapons or take another 300 years to develop faster-than-light travel. Either way, there was no rush to make contact. Al agreed with this assessment. He had watched too many young species tear themselves apart. Humanity would likely be no different. On October 15, 2157, by the human calendar, Al was reviewing his daily reports when his subordinate rushed into the command center. Os was young and easily excited, but something about his expression made Al pay attention. "Ambassador, we have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "Earth has stopped transmitting." Al blinked all 4 of his eyes. "Explain." "All signals from the planet have ceased. Radio, television, satellite communications, everything. The planet has gone completely silent." Al rose from his chair and walked to the main display screen. The holographic image of Earth rotated slowly, blue and green and beautiful, but the data streams that normally surrounded it were empty. No electromagnetic signals of any kind were escaping the atmosphere. "Run full diagnostics on our equipment," Al ordered. "Already done, Ambassador. Our sensors are working perfectly. The silence is coming from Earth itself." This was unprecedented. In 300 years of observation, Earth had never gone silent. Even during their world wars, when cities burned and millions died, the humans had kept transmitting. They were a noisy species, always talking, always broadcasting, always filling the void with their presence. Al opened a priority channel to the Galactic Assembly headquarters on Nexus Prime, a massive space station at the center of Assembly territory. His message was brief and urgent. "This is Observation Post 7. Earth has ceased all electromagnetic transmissions as of 6 hours ago. Cause unknown. Requesting guidance." The response came faster than he expected. The Assembly was notoriously slow, often taking months to decide even minor matters, but this response arrived in minutes. "Maintain observation. Do not intervene. Do not attempt contact. Report any changes immediately." Al did as he was told. He and his team watched Earth around the clock, sleeping in shifts, studying every sensor reading for any hint of what was happening. The planet looked normal. Cities still glowed at night. Vehicles still moved on the roads. Satellites still orbited in their established paths, but not a single signal escaped into space. On the first day, Al assumed there had been some kind of catastrophic failure in human communications infrastructure. Perhaps a solar flare had damaged their equipment. Perhaps a computer virus had crashed their networks. On the second day, he began to grow concerned. The humans should have been able to repair any technical failure by now. On the third day, he started to feel afraid. This silence was intentional. The humans were hiding something. On the fourth day, he increased the sensitivity of every sensor, searching for any clue about what was happening on the surface. On the fifth day, he noticed something strange. There was unusual heat coming from locations around the planet, underground locations, places where his sensors had never detected any significant human activity before. On the sixth day, the heat signatures. They appeared in deserts, in mountains, beneath oceans, under ice caps. Something was powering up, something big. On the seventh day, Al understood. It started at dawn over the Pacific Ocean. A ship rose from beneath the waves. It was unlike anything Al had ever seen. Sleek and angular, built from materials his sensors could not identify, it climbed through the atmosphere and into space with effortless grace. Then another ship emerged, then another, then a dozen more. Within an hour, ships were rising from every continent on Earth. They came from underground bunkers in North America, from hidden facilities beneath the African deserts, from the frozen wastes of Antarctica. They rose from the depths of the deepest lakes and the hearts of the thickest forests. Al watched the count climb on his display screen. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. His hands were shaking. His scales had turned pale white, the color of pure terror among his species. "Ambassador," Oz whispered, his voice cracking, "the count has exceeded 500,000 vessels. 500,000 ships, 500,000 human vessels, rising from a planet that had been classified as primitive, rising from a world that was not supposed to achieve interstellar capability for another 3 centuries. The ships came in all sizes. Some were massive, kilometers long, clearly designed to carry thousands of people across the vast distances between stars. Others were smaller, bristling with weapons that made Al's military training scream warnings. Still others appeared to be cargo vessels, their hulls packed with supplies and equipment. And they moved with a coordination that spoke of years, perhaps decades, of preparation. This was not a spontaneous event. This was the execution of a carefully planned operation. Al forced himself to breathe. He opened another channel to Nexus Prime, his voice steady despite his fear. "This is Observation Post 7. Earth has launched a fleet. Repeat, Earth has launched a fleet. Current count exceeds 500,000 vessels of various configurations. They appear to have full interstellar capability, awaiting instructions." The response took longer this time. When it came, Al could hear the shock in the communications officer's voice. "Message received, Observation Post 7. Stand by. The High Council is being assembled." Al stood by. He watched the human fleet continue to grow, and he wondered how everything he thought he knew about this species had been so completely wrong. On board the carrier vessel Endeavour, Commander Daniel Price watched Earth shrink in the viewport behind him. He was a tall man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. Those lines came from 30 years of carrying a secret that would have seemed impossible to anyone who heard it. 30 years ago, Daniel had been a young naval officer when he was recruited into the Global Defense Initiative. The recruiter had told him that humanity was not alone in the universe. Aliens had been watching Earth for centuries, and those aliens, despite their claims of peaceful observation, had a history of exploiting younger species. Daniel had not believed it at first, but then he had been shown the evidence. Intercepted transmissions, recovered alien technology, decades of intelligence gathered by a secret organization that spanned every nation on Earth. The truth was simple and terrifying. The galaxy was ruled by the Galactic Assembly, a collection of older species who treated younger civilizations as resources to be exploited. When they made first contact with a new species, they offered partnership and protection. But that partnership always came with conditions. Trade agreements that stripped young worlds of their resources, technology sharing that created dependency, political arrangements that turned new species into servants of the old. Humanity had a choice. They could wait to be contacted, accepting whatever scraps the assembly offered them, or they could prepare. They chose to prepare. The Global Defense Initiative had been founded in 2089, after humanity's scientists first detected the alien observation post behind the moon. For nearly 70 years, the organization had worked in absolute secrecy. They reverse-engineered the alien technology they could capture. They developed their own versions of faster-than-light drives. They built ships and weapons and trained crews, all while maintaining the appearance of a primitive species still struggling with its first steps into space. The hardest part had been the secrecy. Millions of people had worked on the project over the decades. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, factory workers, farmers who grew food for hidden underground bases. All of them had kept the secret. All of them had understood that humanity's survival depended on the aliens believing they were harmless. Now, finally, the secret could be revealed. "Commander Price," said Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, his executive officer. She was a small woman with dark hair and sharp eyes. She had served with Daniel for 15 years, and he trusted her more than anyone else in the fleet. "All vessels report ready. The fleet is assembled." Daniel nodded. "Open a channel to all ships." The communications officer, a young man named Brooks, worked his console. "Channel open, sir." Daniel took a deep breath. He had rehearsed this speech 100 times, but now that the moment had arrived, the words felt inadequate for what they were about to do. "This is Commander Price to all vessels. 70 years ago, our grandparents learned that we were not alone in the universe. They learned that the galaxy was controlled by species who would see us as nothing more than servants and resources. They made a choice. They chose to fight. They chose to build. They chose to give us the future we are claiming today." He paused, looking out at the fleet that surrounded the Endeavor. 500,000 ships, each one carrying men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment. "For 70 years we have worked in secret. We have built ships and weapons. We have trained ourselves for war. We have done all of this while pretending to be primitive, while letting the aliens believe they had nothing to fear from us. That deception ends today." Daniel straightened his shoulders. "Today, we announce ourselves to the galaxy. We do not come as beggars, asking for whatever crumbs the older species might offer us. We come as equals, claiming our rightful place among the stars. Today, humanity ascends, and the galaxy will never forget this day." Across the fleet, cheers erupted. On bridges and in engine rooms, in mess halls and crew quarters, humans celebrated the moment they had been waiting for their entire lives. Some laughed, some cried, some simply stood in silence, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. On the Endeavor's bridge, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Then he turned to Maria. "Signal the diplomatic corps. It's time to introduce ourselves." Ambassador had spent 30 years preparing for this conversation. She was tall and elegant, with dark skin and close-cropped gray hair. She had been a diplomat before joining the Global Defense Initiative, skilled in the art of negotiation. But nothing in her previous experience had prepared her for negotiating with aliens. She sat in a small shuttle, reviewing her notes as the craft approached the alien observation post behind the moon. The post was a simple structure, barely visible against the lunar surface. The aliens had designed it to be inconspicuous, just as they had designed their entire observation operation to remain hidden. They had failed. Humanity had known about the post for 70 years. "Ambassador," said her aide, a young man named Gregory Palmer, "we're being hailed." Set aside her notes, put them through. An alien face appeared on the screen. Reptilian features, 4 eyes, scales that shifted from green to pale white. The ambassador from the observation post. "I am Ambassador Al of the Dominion," the alien said, his voice translated by the shuttle's systems. "You are approaching our facility without authorization. Identify yourself and state your intentions." Smiled pleasantly. "I am Ambassador of the United Earth Federation. I am here to deliver a formal communication to the Galactic Assembly. May I dock with your station?" There was a long pause. could see the alien scales shifting through various colors, a sign of emotional disturbance among his species. She had studied everything the initiative knew about the. They were one of the most powerful species in the assembly, known for their cunning and their willingness to exploit younger civilizations. "You have no ships capable of reaching this station," Al said finally. "This is not possible. And yet here I am. May I dock?" Another pause, then reluctantly, "You may dock at Bay 3. The shuttle slid smoothly into the station's docking bay, gathered her materials and stepped out onto the deck, Gregory close behind her. Al was waiting, flanked by two armed guards. "Ambassador," Al said, his voice carefully controlled, "I confess to being surprised by this visit." "I'm sure you are. Shall we speak privately?" They adjourned to a conference room, noted the design of the station, the alien technology that hummed in the walls. Her people had studied similar technology for decades, learning its secrets, improving upon its designs. "Your species has been under observation for 300 years, Al said once they were seated. "We have monitored your development closely. You were not supposed to be capable of interstellar travel for another 3 centuries, at minimum." "Your assessments were incorrect," replied calmly. "Humanity achieved functional faster-than-light drive 42 years ago. We chose not to reveal this capability until we were prepared to defend our interests." "Defend your interests," Al's eyes narrowed. "Against whom?" "Against anyone who might seek to exploit a young species. We have studied the Assembly's history, Ambassador. We know how younger civilizations are treated. We have no intention of becoming another subject race." The silence in the room was heavy. Could see Al processing her words, understanding their implications. "The Assembly has rules," he said finally. "Procedures for making contact with new species. You cannot simply announce yourselves and demand to be treated as equals." "We are not asking permission. We are informing the Assembly of our existence and our capabilities. We are requesting membership, yes, but that request comes with the understanding that we are prepared to defend ourselves if our request is." Removed a data chip from her pocket and placed it on the table. "This contains our formal application for membership in the Galactic Assembly. It also contains a detailed accounting of our military capabilities. I suggest you review it carefully before formulating your response." She stood to leave. "Ambassador," Al said, his voice strained, "you must understand. The Assembly has never encountered a species like yours. This will cause considerable disruption." Paused at the door. "Good. Perhaps the Assembly needs to be disrupted." She left the alien sitting alone in the conference room, staring at the data chip that would change the galaxy forever. The emergency session of the Galactic Assembly began 36 hours later. Representatives from over 200 species filled the massive amphitheater on Nexus Prime. The chamber was designed to intimidate, with towering walls and a central platform where speakers stood beneath the gaze of thousands of alien eyes. High Counselor Ra of the Hegemony presided over the session. She was ancient, even by the long-lived standards of her species, with translucent skin that glowed faintly with internal light. She had guided the Assembly for 400 years, navigating wars and crises with careful wisdom. But nothing had prepared her for this. "The humans have deployed a fleet of 512,000 vessels," the intelligence minister reported, his voice heavy with disbelief. "Our analysis indicates their technology is roughly equivalent to our own in most areas. In some areas, particularly defensive systems and power generation, they may actually exceed our capabilities." Murmurs swept through the amphitheater. This was not supposed to be possible. Younger species were always inferior. That was the natural order of things. "How did this happen?" demanded Ambassador L of the Dominion. His scales were dark with anger. His species had been responsible for monitoring Earth. This failure would cost them dearly in political standing. They were under constant observation. They should not have been capable of this. Their deception was comprehensive, the intelligence minister admitted. They maintained a facade of normal technological progression while conducting their true research in complete secrecy. Underground facilities, underwater bases, orbital platforms hidden behind stealth technology we did not know they possessed. They fooled every observer we placed in their system. The question of how is less important than the question of what now, High Counselor Ra interjected. The humans have requested membership in the Assembly. How do we respond? We reject them, El said immediately. They are too young, too aggressive, they deceived us, we cannot trust them. And if we reject them? Asked Ambassador Ha of the Meridian Collective. The Meridian were a cautious species, known for their careful analysis of every situation. They have made clear they possess significant military capability. Do we wish to test that capability with a war? Are you suggesting we simply give them what they want? El demanded. That we allow them to dictate terms to the Assembly? I am suggesting we consider the costs of various responses before committing to any course of action. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued for military action, a coordinated strike to destroy the human fleet before it could grow stronger. Others counseled diplomacy, suggesting that the humans could be brought into the Assembly's framework and controlled through economic and political pressure. But beneath all the arguments, Ra sensed something that troubled her deeply. Fear. The Assembly was afraid of these humans, afraid of what they had accomplished and what they might accomplish in the future. For the Assembly had operated on a simple principle. Older species guided younger ones. The strong protected the weak, and in return the weak provided resources and labor. It was not exploitation, the Assembly told itself. It was the natural order. It was how civilization advanced. The humans had shattered that principle. They had proven that a young species could rise to challenge the old without permission, without guidance, without accepting the role assigned to them. And that was terrifying. Ra called for a recess. As the representatives filed out of the amphitheater, she summoned her closest advisors to her private chambers. What are our options? She asked them, truly. Admiral Al, commander of the Assembly's combined fleet, spoke first. Military action is possible but risky. The humans have matched us in numbers and appear to have matched us in technology. A war would be costly, and the outcome is uncertain. What about economic pressure? Asked Finance Minister Ma. We control the major trade routes. We could isolate them, cut them off from resources they need. They appear to have prepared for that possibility, said Intelligence Minister L. Our analysis indicates they have stockpiled sufficient resources to sustain their fleet for decades. They have also identified multiple systems with habitable planets and resources that are outside our current sphere of influence. Ra closed her eyes. So we cannot defeat them militarily without great cost. We cannot isolate them economically. What leverage do we have? Silence answered her question. There is one consideration, Admiral Al said finally. The humans appear to be seeking membership in the Assembly, not conflict with it. They have made no aggressive moves. Their fleet remains in defensive positions. Perhaps their goals are genuinely peaceful. Or perhaps they are simply waiting for us to make the first move, Ma countered. Waiting to see if we will attack, so they can claim self-defense when they retaliate. Ra opened her eyes. Arrange a private meeting with their ambassador. I wish to understand what they truly want. Met with High Counselor Ra in a small chamber away from the main amphitheater. No aides, no guards, no recording devices. Just two representatives of their respective civilizations trying to understand each other. Your species has created a difficult situation, Ra began. The Assembly does not know how to respond to you. I understand, replied. We anticipated this reaction. It is why we waited so long to reveal ourselves. You could have made contact decades ago. Why wait? Considered her answer carefully. Because we knew how the assembly treats young species. We studied your history. The. Every civilization that accepted your partnership ended up serving your interests instead of their own. Ra's internal glow flickered, a sign of discomfort. Those arrangements were mutually beneficial. We provided protection and technology. In return, we received cooperation and resources. You received subservience. Your partners became dependent on you, unable to function without your guidance. That is not partnership. That is control. Silence fell between them, waited, letting Ra process her words. What do you want? Ra asked finally, truly. We want genuine partnership. Trade based on mutual benefit, not exploitation. Cultural exchange that enriches both parties. Diplomatic relations between equals, not between master and servant. And if the assembly cannot provide that? Met the High Counselor's gaze steadily. Then we will build our own alliances. There are other species in this galaxy who have suffered under assembly policies, species who might welcome an alternative. The threat was clear. Humanity would not simply accept rejection. They would work to undermine the assembly's power, to create a rival bloc that could challenge the established order. Ra studied the human ambassador for a long moment, was calm and confident, showing no fear despite being in the heart of assembly territory, surrounded by species that had ruled the galaxy for. I will recommend that the assembly accept your application, Ra said finally. But you must understand, there are many who will oppose this. The road ahead will not be easy. We did not expect it to be easy. We only expected it to be possible. The vote took place 3 days later. It was contentious and bitter, with speeches that lasted for hours and arguments that sometimes threatened to turn violent. But in the end, the assembly voted to accept humanity's application for membership. The margin was narrow. Many species opposed the decision. The Dominion and their allies walked out of the amphitheater in protest, vowing to reverse the decision at the first opportunity. But it was done. Humanity had claimed their place among the stars. On board the Endeavour, Daniel Price received the news with quiet satisfaction. The first phase of the plan had succeeded, but he knew the harder work was just beginning. Signal the colony fleet, he ordered Maria. Tell them to proceed. Across the human formation, 12,000 ships broke away from the main fleet. These were the colony vessels, massive arcs carrying millions of people to new worlds. They had been preparing for this journey for decades, training in simulated environments, learning the skills they would need to build new civilizations on distant planets. The colony fleet scattered into the void, each group heading for a different star system. They carried humanity's hopes with them, the dream of spreading across the galaxy and building something that could never be destroyed. Meanwhile, Daniel turned his attention to the diplomatic situation. Joining the assembly was only the first step. Now humanity had to build alliances, establish trade relationships, and navigate the complex politics of galactic civilization. Ambassador reports that the Meridian Collective is interested in separate negotiations, Maria reported. They want to establish direct trade relations outside the assembly framework. Daniel nodded. The Meridian were known for their pragmatism. They saw which way the winds were blowing and wanted to position themselves on the winning side. Accept their invitation, but make it clear we are open to similar arrangements with anyone else who is interested. Over the following weeks, delegations arrived from dozens of species. Some came out of genuine interest in partnership. Others came to gather intelligence, trying to understand this new power that had disrupted the galactic order. A few came with subtle threats, trying to intimidate humanity into accepting unfavorable terms. Handled them all with skill and patience. She made no enemies unnecessarily, but she also made no concessions that would compromise humanity's position. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A delegation requested a private meeting with. They had been among the first species to accept assembly partnership 3 centuries ago. They had paid a heavy price for that partnership, their economy and military controlled by the Dominion. The leader of the delegation was named Aura. She was elderly, her fur silvered with age, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Ambassador," she said, "my people have watched your arrival with great interest. You have done something we thought impossible. You have faced the assembly as equals." "We prepared carefully," replied, "and we were fortunate." "It was more than fortune, it was courage, courage that my people lost long ago." Aura leaned forward. "I have a proposal for you, one that must remain secret at least for now." Listened as Aura explained. They were not alone in their suffering. Dozens of species had been reduced to servitude under assembly policies. They had no power individually, no way to resist the older species that controlled their fate. But together they might have a chance. "We propose an alliance," Aura said. "A coalition of younger species with humanity at its heart. Together, we would have the numbers and resources to challenge the Assembly's dominance. We could create a new order, one based on genuine partnership instead of exploitation." It was a bold idea. It would mean opposing the most powerful political organization in the galaxy. It would mean potential war with species that had ruled the stars for. It was exactly what humanity had hoped for. "I will need to consult with my government," said carefully, "but I believe we will be very interested in your proposal." The coalition of free worlds was announced 6 months later. 17 species signed the founding charter, pledging mutual defense and cooperation. Any member attacked would be defended by all. Any member threatened would be supported by the full resources of the coalition. The announcement sent shockwaves through the galaxy. High Counselor Ra summoned to an emergency meeting. "This is an act of rebellion," Ra declared, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This is an act of justice," replied calmly. "The Assembly has exploited younger species for. We are simply offering an alternative." "You are tearing the galaxy apart." "The galaxy was already torn apart. We are simply making the division visible." Ross stared at the human ambassador for a long moment. "You planned this from the beginning. Joining the Assembly was never your true goal. You wanted to undermine us from within." "Did not deny it. We wanted to offer hope to those who had none. We wanted to show that the established order could be challenged. We wanted to build something better." "Better? You call starting a potential war better?" "We call giving people a choice better. For the first time in centuries, species can choose their own path. They can stay with the Assembly if they wish, or they can join the coalition. The choice is theirs. That is something the Assembly never offered." The conversation ended without resolution. Over the following months, tensions rose. The Dominion and their allies from the Assembly entirely, forming their own bloc. Three-way negotiations between the Assembly, the Coalition, and the began, each side trying to gain advantage without triggering open war. Daniel Price watched the diplomatic maneuvering from his position with the human fleet. The Endeavor remained on patrol, ready to respond if any side made an aggressive move. "This could go on for years," Maria observed, studying the latest intelligence reports. "None of the factions wants to be the first to attack, but none of them wants to back down either." "That's fine," Daniel replied. "Every year that passes without war is a year our colonies grow stronger, a year more species consider joining the coalition, a year the old order loses influence." "You think we can win without fighting?" Daniel shook his head. "There will be fighting eventually, but the longer we can delay it, the better our position will be when it happens." The Cold War continued for 5 years. Small skirmishes occurred along border regions, but no major conflict erupted. Trade between the factions continued, despite official hostilities. The galaxy adjusted to its new reality. During those 5 years, the coalition grew. Species that had been afraid to join initially, worried about retaliation from the assembly, saw that the coalition could protect its members. One by one, they added their names to the charter. The human colonies flourished. New cities rose on distant worlds, connected by trade routes that humanity controlled. Human culture spread across the galaxy, influencing art and music and philosophy in unexpected ways. And humanity continued to prepare for the war they knew was coming. It started with an assassination. High Counselor Ra, who had guided the assembly for 4 centuries, was killed by a bomb planted in her personal shuttle. The attack was blamed on coalition terrorists, though no evidence was ever produced to support this claim. Daniel received the news with grim resignation. It's starting. The Assembly Emergency Council elected a new High Counselor within days. His name was El, the ambassador who had argued for war against humanity from the beginning. His first act was to declare the coalition an illegal organization and demand its immediate dissolution. All coalition vessels are ordered to stand down and submit to assembly authority, El announced. Any resistance will be met with force. The response from the coalition was immediate and united. We do not recognize the authority of those who murder their own leaders to seize power, declared. The coalition stands together. Any attack on one member will be treated as an attack on all. The First Galactic War began 3 days later. The Assembly fleet attacked a coalition outpost in the Meridian system. The outpost was defended by a combined force of Meridian and human ships. The battle lasted for 6 hours, with heavy casualties on both sides. But when it was over, the Assembly fleet retreated, unable to break through the coalition defenses. Daniel commanded the human forces in the battle. He had spent 30 years preparing for this moment, but the reality of combat was nothing like the simulations. Ships exploded around him, crewed by men and women he had trained with. The enemy was not a faceless threat, but intelligent beings who believed they were fighting for their own survival. When the battle ended, Daniel sat alone in his quarters, staring at the casualty reports. 18 human ships lost, over 4,000 dead, and this was only the first engagement of what promised to be a long war. Maria found him there hours later. "We won," she said quietly. "We held the line." "At what cost?" "The cost of freedom, the same cost humans have always paid." Daniel looked up at her. "Did we make the right choice? Revealing ourselves, challenging the assembly, we could have stayed hidden. We could have avoided all of this." Maria sat down across from him. "And become what? Another subject species, bowing to aliens who saw us as resources. Our grandparents made a choice 70 years ago. They chose to fight for a future where humanity could determine its own destiny. We are honoring that choice. We are sending people to die. People have always died for what they believe in. The question is whether what we believe in is worth dying for." Maria leaned forward. "I believe it is. Every person in this fleet believes it is. That is why we are here." Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he straightened in his chair and pulled up the tactical display. "Where is the assembly fleet regrouping?" "They have fallen back to the system. Intelligence suggests they are gathering reinforcements for another attack." "Then we need to be ready for them." The war lasted for 12 years. It was fought across thousands of star systems, involving hundreds of species and billions of combatants. The casualties were staggering, the destruction immense. But slowly, inevitably, the coalition gained ground. The assembly was hampered by internal divisions. They wanted to prosecute the war aggressively, but other species grew tired of the endless fighting. One by one, their support, declaring neutrality or even switching sides to join the coalition. The coalition, by contrast, fought with unified purpose. Every species in the alliance knew what they were fighting for: freedom, equality, the right to determine their own future. These ideals gave them strength that the Assembly, fighting to preserve its own dominance, could not match. In the war's 10th year, the Dominion suffered a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Nexus Prime. An alliance fleet led by Daniel Price broke through the defenses and captured the station that had been the heart of the Assembly for. L fled the station before it fell. He would spend the rest of the war moving from system to system, trying to rally support that never came. 2 years later, they signed a surrender agreement. The war was over. The peace treaty that followed was called the Compact of Free Worlds. It established a new galactic order based on the principles the coalition had fought for. No species would be forced into subordinate partnerships. Trade would be conducted between equals. Disputes would be resolved through negotiation, not conquest. It was not a perfect peace. Resentments lingered. Some species refused to accept the new order and continued to resist. But for most of the galaxy, the war's end brought relief and hope. Daniel Price did not live to see the peace he had fought for. He died in the war's final year, killed when his flagship was ambushed by raiders. He was 78 years old and had spent his entire adult life fighting for humanity's freedom. Maria Santos took command after his death. She led the fleet to victory and represented humanity at the peace negotiations. When asked about Daniel's legacy, she gave a simple answer. He gave us the stars. He gave us our future. There is no greater gift. 20 years after the war's end, a memorial was dedicated on Earth. It stood in a park overlooking the ocean, a simple column of stone with the names of every human who had died in the conflict. At the column's base was an inscription. They faced the stars with courage. They fought for freedom. They gave everything so that humanity could claim its place among the civilizations of the galaxy. May their sacrifice never be forgotten. People came from across human space to visit the memorial. They touched the names of their ancestors, their parents, their friends. They wept and remembered and honored those who had given their lives. And sometimes, on clear nights, they looked up at the stars and saw not distant lights but doorways. Doorways to worlds their children and would explore. Doorways to a future without limits. Earth had gone silent overnight. Then 500,000 human vessels had ascended, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The ambassador Aura lived long enough to see the peace she had helped create. In her final years, she wrote a memoir about her experiences, including her first meeting with the humans who had changed everything. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy, she wrote. They were not the most ancient or the most wise, but they had something the older races had forgotten. They had hope. They believed that the future could be better than the past, and they were willing to fight for that belief. When I first met them, I thought they were foolish. How could such a young species challenge the powers that had ruled for? But I underestimated them. I underestimated their courage, their determination, their refusal to accept the role that had been assigned to them. They taught us that we did not have to be victims. They taught us that we could choose our own destiny. They taught us that freedom was not a gift to be given by the powerful, but a right to be claimed by the brave. I will be forever grateful to them. My people will be forever grateful to them, and the galaxy will never forget what they did. The memorial on Earth grew over the years. Gardens were planted around it, filled with flowers from 100 worlds. Visitors came from every corner of the galaxy, not just humans and Meridian and dozens of other species. They came to remember those who had died, but they also came to celebrate what had been built, a galaxy where cooperation had replaced exploitation, a civilization where young species and old worked together as equals. It was not perfect. Nothing built by living beings ever is. There were still conflicts, still injustices, still wrongs that needed to be righted. But there was also hope. There was also progress. There was also the knowledge that things could change, that the future was not fixed, that brave souls willing to take risks could reshape the very foundations of civilization. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not their ships or their weapons or their technology, their refusal to accept the world as it was, their insistence that it could be better, their willingness to fight and sacrifice and die for a future they might never see. Earth had gone silent overnight. Then 500,000 human vessels had ascended. And the galaxy was better for it. Lived to be 93 years old. In her final interview, given a few months before her death, she was asked what moment in her long career she was most proud of. She thought for a while before answering. "My first meeting with High Counselor Ra," she said finally. "She asked me what humanity truly wanted. I told her we wanted genuine partnership. She warned me that the road ahead would not be easy. She was right. It was not easy. We lost so many good people. We made mistakes that cost lives. There were times when I wondered if we were doing the right thing. But when I look at what we have now, when I see human children playing with children, when I see trade ships traveling freely between worlds that were once enemies, when I see the memorial on Earth and know that those who died did not die in vain, I know we made the right choice. We reached for the stars. We claimed our place among the civilizations of the galaxy. We proved that humanity would not bow to those who would exploit us. That is what I am most proud of, not what I did as an individual, what we did as a species, what we built together." Died peacefully in her home, surrounded by family. Her funeral was attended by dignitaries from across the galaxy. She was buried in the garden surrounding the memorial on Earth, joining the other heroes who had given everything for humanity's future. Her epitaph was simple. She spoke for humanity, and the galaxy listened. The story did not end with death, of course. Stories never truly end. They simply continue, chapter after chapter, generation after generation. Humanity spread across the galaxy. They built colonies on thousands of worlds, each one unique, each one a testament to human adaptability and determination. They discovered ancient ruins and made contact with species the assembly had never encountered. They pushed the boundaries of science and art and philosophy. They also made mistakes. They fought among themselves sometimes, as humans have always done. They made decisions that harmed others, decisions they would later regret. They were not perfect, and they never claimed to be. But they kept trying. They kept reaching for something better. They kept honoring the legacy of those who had come before them. And the galaxy continued to change. The coalition evolved into a true interstellar federation, with representatives from hundreds of species working together on the great challenges of the age: climate restoration, resource management, the search for meaning in an infinite universe. The old powers adapted or faded. The Dominion eventually rejoined the galactic community, chastened by their defeat, but eventually willing to try new ways of relating to other species. They found new purpose as mediators and diplomats. Even the most resistant species gradually accepted that the old order was gone and a new one had taken its place. It took centuries for the wounds of the war to fully heal, but they did heal eventually. The galaxy moved forward. And through it all, humanity remained at the heart of the change, not as conquerors or masters, but as partners and pioneers. They had proven something important in those early days, when Earth went silent and 500,000 vessels ascended. They had proven that courage and determination could overcome any obstacle. They had proven that the future belonged to those willing to fight for it. That proof echoed through the centuries, inspiring generations yet unborn. It echoes still. In the garden surrounding the memorial on Earth, a child played among the flowers. She was human, dark-haired and dark-eyed, perhaps 6 years old. She ran and laughed and chased butterflies, unaware of the weight of history that surrounded her. Her grandmother watched from a nearby bench, smiling at the simple joy of childhood. "Grandma," the child called out, "why is this place special?" The grandmother considered her answer. How do you explain centuries of history to a 6-year-old? How do you convey the sacrifices, the struggles, the triumphs that had shaped the world she would inherit? A long time ago, the grandmother said finally, brave people did something very difficult. They stood up for what they believed in, even when it was scary. They fought to make the galaxy a better place. Did they win? The grandmother looked up at the sky, where ships from a dozen worlds traced paths among the stars. Yes, she said, they won. The child nodded, satisfied with this answer, and returned to her play. The grandmother watched her with eyes full of love and hope. Earth had gone silent overnight. Then 500,000 human vessels had ascended. And somewhere, in a garden on a world that had once seemed so small and alone, a child played among the flowers, unaware that her ancestors had changed the galaxy, unaware that she would help change it too. The story continued. It always continues.